Hello, everyone. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet, about to be joined by Ken Weed from Sportsnet. This is the Kenny and Renny post-game show, Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final Edition, and they are partying in the streets of Montreal, and I'm not kidding about that. I was going to actually open up the windows behind me because they were firing off fireworks. I was walking through the crowd, and one whizzed right past my head. It was they're having fun out there, enjoying themselves. We always have fun on this show, but it's always more fun when Kenny shows up. So let's bring Kenny in here. There's the man with the best intro music in the business. How are you doing tonight, Ken?
Tremendous, Sean. Thank you, man. How about yourself? We'll get rolling right away here, but that had to be pretty cool to see and witness live.
Yeah, no, it was something else. Here, Marcus is saying, "Hype me up, Sean. Let's go." You know what? You were hyped up being in that building. It was absolutely phenomenal. That building lost its mind, and I can tell you this, Ken, that like the tenseness. Eric had a great line when we were doing our post-game chat. He'd said, we were talking about that tense moment when Shea Weber takes the high sticking penalty at the end of the game, heading into the period, and he'd said, "You want to know what 3,500 tense fans sound like? The same as 21,800 fans sound like," right? That building was so nervous and so tense, but I do have to say there was this level of confidence in the building that they were going to get through that power play, and I did not think that they were going to. Absolutely phenomenal job by the Canadiens on the special teams tonight, and we'll dig into all of that. But I can tell you, that building absolutely lost its mind. The Canadiens players, you could tell, got a huge charge out of that. And this was maybe the earliest I got out of the building, definitely after a win. And the streets were interesting. You get, redirected. There's certain areas you can't go. The riot police are making sure that you don't go to certain areas. But they'd kind of pushed everyone right in front of our hotel at the Sheraton here. Fireworks going off. I got some great videos. I mean, it was an absolute party in the streets. Montreal is having a great time, as they should. That was a phenomenal game. Ken, what'd you think?
Tremendous. We'll get right into this in a second here, but yeah, I love the game. I thought it was exciting. Certainly some wobbly moments at times for the Montreal Canadiens, but that's what happens when you're playing a team that's as great as the Tampa Bay Lightning. A lot of resolve shown by the Montreal Canadiens, and man, Dom Ducharme, we talked about it before the game, Sean. Incredible job of pulling the strings and making some moves. I know there were some folks that didn't necessarily like what was being done, but immediate dividends by pretty much everybody who was shifted around the lineup or inserted. I know not everyone agrees with everything that happened, but incredible contributions and none bigger than the job that Josh Anderson did. Both you and I love the move going into this game. I think Josh Anderson is kind of one of those guys who really flourishes with the more responsibility you give him, and he was absolutely on point tonight all game long. I thought he was physical, he was skating. The game winner is just it just embodies everything that Josh Anderson can do. And if you're looking closely, absolutely brilliant maneuver by Josh Anderson. Stick lift on Yanni Gourde. And don't let anybody fool you, Sean. Yanni Gourde is one of the strongest guys on the puck in the NHL, even though he's not a big guy. Stick lift is exceptional. And then the burst of speed to get his shoulder underneath on Jan Ruda and get to the net. Outstanding play. And also, a lot of people could have quit on that play. The puck gets to Caulfield. Anderson is below the goal line. He hustles back out, gets to it, bangs it in. Just an exceptional play. I'm not sure how many folks were upset with Marc Bergevin when he was acquiring Josh Anderson. He's a guy that a lot of people were in demand for this player's services going into this season, and what an addition.
I'll be honest, Ken, I was surprised at how much they paid him. I loved the addition, but I was surprised how much they paid him, and I still do think that maybe for his offensive production. But you can see, and I mean, it's one of the reasons we were both thought this was such a great move. Like, I thought Anderson on that third line, and I know a lot of people were really upset about Jesperi Kotkaniemi being out of the lineup. He's one of those guys. Like, every market's got those guys, and he's one of those guys at the analytics. He's an analytics darling. The fans like him because he's a great kid. He's got a lot of good effort. He's done amazing things these playoffs so far, so I can totally understand why people were upset that he got taken out of the lineup. But at the same time, I can entirely understand the moves that were made. For me, those moves were about trying to spark Josh Anderson and Tyler Toffoli. I don't know that Tyler Toffoli got the boost that they were hoping out of him tonight, but Josh Anderson was absolutely great. And boy, oh boy, what a difference he made. Hey, I wanted to actually bring something up here. Where are we with Mist? Where are you? Quick. Okay, I'll come back to it.
For those Jets fans that are in the chat, Dennis Bayak, I can report, I got a text message this afternoon. It was an 8-iron on the second hole today, hole-in-one for Bayak, third of his career. So those of you from Winnipeg, yes, those rumors are true. Let's get back to hockey here.
Third of his career, and now he's tied with Ken. And Ken is trying to act calm about this whole situation right now. He's not at all. He's choked because now he's like, I got to go out and I got to get another one. And he will. I'd said to him, you know what, maybe let's leave some for the rest of us, Ken and Dennis. But
I'd be happy to watch your next one.
So Ray-Ban, I was actually thinking about you during the game today, not for this comment, but earlier on you had talked about, here we go. And finally we hit Kucherov, Stamkos, and point about time. Ray-Ban had gone on and on in our last Kenny and Renny show after Game 3 about that the four not hitting. And I always do say this. I always say, like, well, you want to hit those guys, try going out and catching them. It's easier said than done. Everyone always talks about Connor McDavid and saying, oh, you just got to get a body on the guy. Well, it's not that easy. Those guys don't get hit because guys don't want to hit them. They don't get hit because they're hard to hit. But boy, oh boy, Ray-Ban, I was thinking exactly about you when that game was going on because Shea Weber was punishing Braden Point. I loved the way that they played tonight, that physical element to it. I thought they did a great job of doing that without it leading to penalties, although there was a lot of other stuff that led to penalties. Not going to get overly into the reffing, but I thought it was massively imbalanced again tonight. I thought there was a couple soft ones, and then I thought the refs went out of their way in situations to even up calls when they didn't need to go out of the way to even up calls, and the aggressors in those situations were a team that already had the penalty imbalance. But we're not going to go down that road. But we listen to you, the chat room, when we're doing this, and boy, oh boy, Ray-Ban, you had it right. That was exactly how they played, and I gotta say, there was a comment made, and I think it was made by John Cooper, about, the longer this series goes on, especially if the Canadiens are playing like that, the more it favors the Canadiens. If I'm the Canadiens, I feel good about the body that I laid on that team tonight, knowing that there's not any more built-in rest days. It's 2 days, travel and go. I thought they did a really, really good job tonight because Braden Point came out, he was flying, and I think he got chopped down a little bit. We'll see how it plays out in the next game. Ken?
Yeah, interesting. Definitely the physical element was important, obviously, for the Montreal Canadiens. I thought, especially their defense core, which had not been quite as physical, that's for sure. And we saw the numbers. They were in the hundreds and nearly 200 minutes of playing with the lead in those previous series. So I thought that their defense core was excellent. I thought Shea Weber was absolutely outstanding. And what a great job by the Canadiens to kill off the double minor, because that would have been just an absolutely terrible way for a series to end for someone who waited so long to get to this point and had played so well. It's one of those things where he is just so strong that he won the battle with Andre Palat and just could not keep his stick on the ground right there. So great kill, just outstanding penalty kill. 5 for 5 today. John, we were texting about it during the first period. Boy, oh boy, the puck movement by the Tampa Bay Lightning early, and sure, they may have benefited. Point wraps a shot off the post, and Kucherov misses a one-timer here and there, but 5 for 5, pretty impressive. You have to give the Canadiens credit, and they got a nice boost from the penalty kill. Speaking of players inserted, Romanov, I thought, was excellent for the most part. Yes, he was on the ice for that 2-on-1, but the part of the play, Sean, that is so subtle. I agree with Kevin Bieksa. I don't think that it was a necessary. It was an overly aggressive play by Kulak on the offensive blue line. But Pat Maroon, in vintage Pat Maroon fashion, just kind of subtly sticks his elbow out and kind of knocks him off balance.
Right.
And that's what creates the odd man rush. I mean, you might call it interference. You could call it interference, but man, oh man, I am not seething at all, Jeff. I am as happy for others who get hole-in-ones as I am for myself. No, it's not. No, I don't get mad. I get super happy for people. I love when people get aces.
Is stabbing himself under the table with a fork.
I am not at all.
Don't listen to this guy.
Not at all.
Not at all. It's eating him up inside.
Loved Romanov's game overall. He actually Matthew Joseph makes just an exceptional pass to Pat Maroon for the tap in. And rebound, that's what I had just finished saying. It was interference, but I like Kulak's game overall, even though he was a little bit aggressive on that situation. And yes, the Canadiens got caught with those two guys on the ice, but it was against the fourth line, so I don't think that that's a coaching issue there whatsoever. I think one thing they could have done was try to just dump the puck on net to try to get a whistle. Because of that, with 6 players on the bench, in the box, 3 for each team, I think 6 minutes of time with those guys in the penalty box was an issue. But I loved Romanov. I love the fact Romanov got the goal. I thought he was physical that time when there was a physical play behind the net. I think it was again on point. It was Edmondson and Romanov there. Loved it. Great job overall coming in. I thought their mobility, which was one of the biggest reasons that they were inserted into the lineup, was on display. And the one other thing for Kulak, yes, he was caught on that 2-on-1 rush, which was could have been interference. He also doesn't get an assist on the first goal, but makes a really nice play along the boards to get that exit. And that's one thing we've seen from the Canadiens. The neutral zone exits have been really solid all throughout these playoffs. Kulak gets it up to Suzuki. Suzuki gets it to Caulfield, gets it back, and what an exceptional pass. And great finish. Here you go. Josh Anderson gets this promotion and then bangs one home early on. I thought that was absolutely massive for the Canadiens. But, that play doesn't happen unless Kulak gets the stretch pass going there. So I thought the Canadiens' defense was excellent. Ben Sherratt, 9 hits in the game tonight. Yes, there was a massive error made by Jeff Petrie. Mm-hmm. I went back and looked. I don't like that turnover at all. I will say, in his defense, at least partial defense, the outlet up the middle, the player needs to do a little bit of better job of opening up or else providing a little bit closer support. But I don't like Petrie going up the middle there. I like him. Yeah. He should have been going up the boards.
The boards are wide open, yeah.
Again, I'm not taking him completely off the hook, but I don't necessarily like how that was played. However, for the most part, the defense core was excellent. And Sean, Carey Price said he needed to be better. He was a man of very few words the other day, but pointed the finger squarely at himself. And as good as Josh Anderson was, as good as Shea Weber was, best player on the ice was Carey Price. And that is exactly what the Montreal Canadiens needed to keep their season alive.
But to Ray-Ban's point, the defense got physical and they let him see the puck. There weren't those moments where Carey Price was looking around and, pucks were going on net. He looked like he didn't have an idea where they were. This was And, I get it. They got outshot. I was looking at the stat line. They got outshot. They got outchanced. Tampa, this is one of those games where you could say that I don't think it was a huge discrepancy, but I think you could say, the deserve to win a meter was probably at about 62-64% for Tampa tonight. Montreal escapes that and gets out, but I do think this was a lot closer to the game that the Canadiens want to play. But I mean, here's another thing that I didn't like about that turnover was not only does it get turned over, but if you notice on the back check, the guy who's mad at it is Nick Suzuki's. And if you take a look at Nick Suzuki's back check, it is a slow turn and a glide until right at the last second he realizes that his man Barclay Goodrow is wide open and gets beat to the net. And the one thing that I would say about the way that Tampa has played in this series, they don't make a lot of mistakes, but when they do, every guy on the ice scrambles as fast as they can to get back into position. I think that's been a big weakness of the Canadiens so far in this series, is that when turnovers happen, but when they do happen, it seems like it takes them a while to recognize where they should be on the ice. To me, it's always simple. If there's a guy ahead of you, you are fighting as hard as you can to get in between he and the net. And that's what Nick Suzuki should have been doing there. And anyone who goes back and looks at that play is going to look and see that back check was not good enough. I don't do this to crap on Nick Suzuki, because Nick Suzuki, that pass for Anderson was phenomenal. He was all over the place tonight. That little shifty move he made, Ken, when he was going in on two, where he just kind of turned sideways and it was almost like it was like watching a ringette player have that insane control over the puck, moved it to the slot, turned and got a shot. And then a couple other times he just held the puck and waited for the rest of his teammates to come in. He was outstanding tonight. This is just another example of, if you are the Montreal Canadiens, you are watching what that young man is doing time and time again in these biggest moments. You are salivating on what the potential of this player is. I wanted to touch on this. Waiters says, reminder for Habs fans, and it's clear from Waiters' comments, Waiters wants to take it to the Habs fans, but he says Tampa hasn't lost 2 playoff games in a row since 2019. I find this interesting because at this stage, I think this stat works more for the Montreal Canadiens than it does for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Because if the Canadiens were going to, if the Canadiens were going to look at this stat and say, well, that's it, we might as well pack it in, you can't beat this team 2 straight, then they would have packed it in after game 1, right?
Well, the players don't care about the stats, though.
Listen, you know what I'm saying. If
Pat Maroon said it this morning, we don't care about the stats. You guys make a big deal out of them. But I know what you mean, of course.
I'm not saying but I'll say this. The Winnipeg Jets went all year, and what did they do? They bragged over and over and over again. I shouldn't say bragged, but they, patted themselves on the back over and over again about the fact that they had only once lost back-to-back games. They didn't lose back-to-back games, and then the end of the season came, and this team that always bounced back so well suddenly lost back-to-back games, and then it turned into 3, and then it turned into 4, and they went on a little bit of a slide. This is the kind of stuff that can happen in the playoffs. Did Colorado lose 4 games in a row all year?
I'm not sure.
I don't think they did. I'm fairly certain they did they blew a late lead.
Sean, we know in 2018 the Jets.
Let me finish this point.
I'm with you. I'm on your side.
All I'm saying here is Waiters is saying this, and then all of a sudden, this works out. So the Canadiens can take this one of 2 ways. Well, we got our win, but no one beats Tampa back-to-back, so let's shut it down and take this home, which they should have done in game 1, because if they can't beat Tampa back-to-back, once Tampa won game 1, the series was over. Right? Well, at this stage now, if the Canadiens can go down to Tampa and knock them off, then they're coming back to their home rink, to an excited fan base that's ready to go after knocking this team off 2 in a row. And now this feeling of, not being able to beat this team 2 in a row, it's gone. And you're right. I don't necessarily think that the players care about the stats, but they know what it feels like to be in a place they haven't been a long time, Ken. They know what it feels like to be in a situation. No one is sitting there and checking the stat line and saying, well, we can cross that stat off 592 days since our last injury, scratch it off and put it to 0. It's not like it's going to be like that, but the feeling of being impenetrable in a day after game, if the Canadiens pop that next game, then all that is out. It's all out the window. Now, well, what's to say they don't lose 3 in a row? And if they don't lose 3 in a row, all of a sudden it's a winner-take-all Game 7. I like this stat for the Montreal Canadiens right now, because the Canadiens can take this as a challenge and say, let's go knock this down, show these guys that they're not invincible in this spot. And then to me, everything gets really interesting if they can win the next game, because if they win the next game, everyone has to hop on a plane, come back here. Momentum has switched. And now all of a sudden, the pressure increasingly falls on the shoulders of the Tampa Bay Lightning, because the last thing they want this series doing is going 7 games. So to me, next game is absolutely, absolutely critical.
The Canadiens did their job by planting the seed of doubt, which is what you just said. But if you're the Lightning, you feel excellent going into the next game because you're confident. You think you're the Cup champs. The other team still has to beat you 3 times. So I do agree with you. Sure. If you're the Canadiens, all you're doing is looking for rallying points. So you just found yourself another one. But to me, that doesn't impact whatsoever how the Lightning play in Game 5. But you're right. If you're Montreal, you're Brendan Gallagher. You just heard him say it. We don't do anything the easy way, and the easy way, or the opposite of the easy way, is falling down 3-0 against an excellent team that knows how to win. So I do think there is, they can certainly use it to rally, but I don't think it will be a big factor in the outcome of the next game. One quick one here, Roos J1199. Anderson reminds you of John LeClair. For me, Anderson is just so much better of a skater. In terms of being a power forward, yes, but Anderson is a little bit lighter on his feet, I would say. But it is, pretty good comparison in terms of being strong in the puck and being a power forward for sure. Yeah, Sean, it's certainly interesting. We're always fascinated to see how people regroup. Victor Hedman seemed pretty annoyed today. So did Barclay Goodrow, but that's good. If you had a chance to win the cup and you didn't do it, of course you should feel annoyed. But at the same time, I don't think Tampa Bay is shaking in its boots because they gave up the lead for the first time in the Stanley Cup final. So I think they've had. The other thing about the bounce back stat is that Andrei Vasilevsky has been absolutely dynamite after losses.
Right.
So some Habs fans were saying, "Yep, they've scored a lot of goals now." That's 6 goals in 2 games against the guy who was the front runner to win the Conn Smythe Trophy. So if you're the Montreal Canadiens, you are feeling pretty good. We talked about it the other day. The 3rd goal by Perry, yes, it's a great shot, but it was kind of like the goal itself, I don't think really mattered or planted any seeds of doubt for Vasilevsky, but now 2 games in a row, he's given up 3 goals. So if you're Montreal, you feel a little bit better about an offense that had only scored twice in 2 games. So Caulfield, yeah, another really energetic game. Gave them a nice boost offensively. And I agree with you. I think somebody else, Waiters, had asked if we think Toffoli's injured. I certainly don't think that he is moving very freely on the ice. So to me, it suggests that he's never been a real burner when it comes to speed or skating. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's dealing with some kind of a lower body issue. But having said that, I think the Canadiens need him to be more dangerous. And I think that's why they moved into that top line. I actually like Brendan Gallagher, who's very involved and did his job. But if we're being completely honest, I thought that line, I expected a little bit more out of that line, didn't you?
Sorry, which line?
The Danault line with Toffoli and Gallagher. I think they had some moments, but I didn't really think that they were really shining. I thought the Suzuki line really carried the Canadiens, and I love that energy line. A lot of people upset about Kotkaniemi, as you mentioned. I thought Jake Evans gave the forward group a really good boost. Physical, engaged, fast. Lehkonen and Evans obviously have some chemistry out there. I really liked that line. And I really also thought, Sean, the 4th line was much more effective than at times. They were much more like they looked at times against Vegas, at times against Winnipeg, at times against Toronto. I thought that Eric Stahl, I thought, did a really nice job. And Yoel Armia, I thought, was dynamite. That tripping call I didn't really much care for. I didn't really think it had much to do with the play. I guess you can call it, but if you call it, I also want you to call tripping on Vasilevsky on Anderson when he cuts to the net. The Danault one is kind of a 50-50 play for me, but overall, like you said, we don't want to get into roughing here, and let's keep rolling here. Let's keep rolling.
Sure.
What anything specific
like
that's
you brought it up.
Well, obviously, I did bring it up because I didn't really think it. It wasn't. Let's just say it wasn't the best effort. I don't think it was a big factor, but I mean, as was aptly pointed out to me, the Petrie turnover doesn't happen if the Canadians were put on the power play for the trip on Vasilevsky. So I guess that is fair. But at the same time, I don't think that it was a major factor. And obviously, when the penalty kill goes 5 for 5 for the Montreal Canadiens, then special teams weren't a factor. So let's just leave it in the side hill and continue from there. What stood out to you about the Tampa Bay Lightning's play? At one point, the shot attempts were super high, but they didn't really have.
I want to counter to what you're not counter, but I want to kind of add to what you're saying. I really do think you were talking about that energy line. I really do think, and it's funny because they started out the game and they had a bad shift, right? Like they go out right off the bat. And again, like, boy, that's something we should maybe talk about is the Canadiens' inability to kind of keep up with the Tampa Bay Lightning from the drop of the puck. That was dangerous. That was a dangerous start to that game. Had Tampa gone out and scored early like that, that game is over in my mind. But I'll say this, that energy line, Dominic Ducharme used them up and down against a lot of different lines. And so you were talking about the success that the fourth line had. I think that by using that third line the way that they did, where sometimes they used them against Kucherov, sometimes they used them against Gord, sometimes they used them against Cirelli's line, they were kind of out against everybody. And what it did is it really allowed Ducharme to choose the moments that he was going to put that fourth line out there. So I thought he put them in a lot of situations to succeed because of what that third line did. And you could see, I mean, never mind, like I had wondered, okay, well, if you put that line together, and this is the line that, the line he used about the line before the game was, this line did so well against Connor McDavid as the season was winding down. They felt if you could shut down Connor McDavid, which that line did a really good job of, then they're confident that they should be able to shut down whoever else they were playing against. My question about that was Jake Evans had played one game before this since the big Mark Scheifele hit. And, I didn't think that he looked that good in that game. So I was wondering how much confidence he would have in that line, being able to move it against whoever he was going to move it against. And that all disappeared when I saw how he started using Jake Evans on the penalty kill. Sure. Right off the bat, he was getting, like, Jake Evans took a really, really big role in tonight's game. It's not one of those ones that, it didn't show up on the scoreboard. He doesn't look like Suzuki. He doesn't look like Anderson, but he took a huge chunk of that game tonight. And you better believe that Montreal Canadiens team went into their dressing room after that and looked over at Evans and thought to themselves, you know what? He's giving us confidence, and we want to win for that guy. The situation that he's gone through, he had a phenomenal game tonight. Again, that opened things up for everybody. I do agree with you that top line didn't look as dangerous as maybe Dominic Ducharme would have hoped that they look. But to me, it comes down to Toffoli. I feel like Toffoli is still kind of trying to find his spot. Someone had asked earlier in the chat room if he's injured, and it reminds me of, the Winnipeg Jets questions about Pierre-Luc Dubois. Is he injured? Because people were surprised at the way he was playing. I'm not saying he's injured. I'm not saying he
looks injured.
Right.
We don't know that he is, but he looks injured. But
if he's not, it's one of these situations where he's just not getting it done right now. And I thought that line did a decent job. There was a couple times they got caught, but they still played defensively the way they need them to, right? I just thought that, and in the end, I guess if they don't get going the way that you've upset that third line, I don't think you expect a lot of points out of Jake Evans' third line.
He did get one today. He got the assist on the Romanov goal. So he did show up on the score sheet along with the PK work. And I don't think Kotkaniemi comes back in for Game 5. And I know a lot of people are talking about Tatar. I'm sorry. Thomas Tatar is not a real big playoff performer. That's some people saying Toffoli's like Tyler Toffoli. The difference between Toffoli going quiet. Toffoli had an 8-game point streak before he went quiet. Toffoli led their team in scoring, so his rope is a little bit longer here. So we're not going to see Tatar. Ducharme can say he likes him as a player, but he's about third in. So he's not going in before Kotkaniemi is back, nor should he, and nor should Jake Evans go anywhere. He had an excellent game. Tyler Toffoli has earned the right to remain in the lineup, and I also think I would give him another shot on that first line. I think that there's still the potential for them to have a big impact on the series, and like I said, I still like Gallagher's effort, and Danault is always going to give you effort, so it's just a matter of needing one glorious scoring chance. Tyler Toffoli can erase a 7-game drought or whatever it is.
Kenny's water bottle tried to stick some pretty heavy stuff at my feet here, blaming me if the Montreal Canadiens lose going forward. So I'm glad, because the rule is someone has to ask for it. And Kevin Yimina, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, asked for it. So here it is. Let's put on Shad's headband so that I don't get stuck by Kenny's water bottle getting blamed for it. I've got
Tremendous.
a mute button here, Kenny's water bottle. Don't be trying to play me like that in the future. I don't know. Anyways, the headband's on. The show has really started now. Now we can start the show here, Ken. But the show can start. There we go. Lisa's, we got the Vulcan mind meld going on here. So, Ken, you wanted to talk about Tampa. Did you think that a lot of people are saying they thought they looked slower tonight? Do you agree with that?
I don't think they necessarily looked a lot slower. I think because the Canadiens were physical, I think that maybe led to some of it. But, there was also a pretty big stretch where the Canadiens were on their heels again. If it weren't for Carey Price's stellar play, it could have been interesting, obviously. But I don't think that Tampa looked like a team that's going to lose 4 in a row. That's what I would say to you right now.
That's a good point.
I think that this is a very composed group. I think it's natural that, we talked about urgency all year long, Sean. One team had all the urgency in this game. But that's because they're trying to keep their season alive. We talk about this all the time, and it's one of my biggest annoyances in sports. The whole theory about a must-win game. The first must-win game of this series was played tonight, even though I totally understand it's a lot better for them if they had won game 2 or 3. Today was a real must-win game. Canadiens now 4-0 in closeout games, right? So, or maybe it's even better than that. They've been really good with their season on the line. I thought they found the recipe in game 2, and today they stuck to the recipe, and that's one of the reasons their season was able to continue. They still they had 2 leads that they were unable to hold, and they needed overtime to get there. So, but that's okay. All you have to do, they don't ask how, they just ask how you stay alive, or if you can stay alive, and they absolutely did that. So, I give the Canadiens a lot of credit because it would have been easy for them to fold. Tracy, you're right. Price looked, I thought Price was absolutely fantastic in this game. And I think he had to be. He needed to be, and he's going to need to be again if the season wants to continue. Jeff Petrie said it great. It said it perfectly the other day, Sean, when he was asked if you didn't want to see Tampa celebrate on your home ice. Those guys don't want to see Tampa celebrate at all. And I loved that he let that out. No player thinks, oh, it'd be even better. I don't care if they win, but as long as they don't win on our ice. They don't want to lose at all, nor should they. They're 3 wins away from the Stanley Cup. Tampa Bay is not complacent. I'm sorry.
No, there won't be.
I've listened to every one of their Zoom calls since the series has started. This is a team that is incredibly hungry. All they've been talking about is legacy and cementing their status on 2 cups in 10 months. So I don't think that Tampa played with a laissez-faire attitude whatsoever. Montreal deserved to win tonight. They won the game, and now it's up to Montreal to show that they can do it 2 games in a row. They have not done that in this series. They have done it throughout these playoffs, and I expect that they will produce another excellent effort. But if Canadiens fans think that the Lightning are going to fold because they lost a game on the road in overtime, I've got news for you. That simply is not going to be happening.
Yeah, I agree, but I will say this about the Montreal Canadiens: they had their game tonight was one that they escaped with a game after blowing two leads, and
Yep.
with egregious mistakes. I thought, and so my take on it is, if I'm the Canadians, I walk away from that game and I say, okay, never mind that we got away with it. That we know that mistakes have been a problem for us in this series. Emily Kaplan, did you see this tweet? Emily Kaplan had a phenomenal tweet. I retweeted it. It had something to do with, okay, 11 goals for Tampa Bay in this series have come within 10 seconds.
Right. Yeah.
Of the Montreal Canadiens turning over the puck. And, sometimes turnovers happen, but there's been a lot of egregious turnovers. And there was one of those tonight. And then I thought, I know what you're saying about Kulak.
Yeah, 11.
And yeah, I know what you're saying about Kulak, and that there was maybe a little bit of the big rig game, a little bit of a shot and took him out of the play. But my counter to that, Ken, is he shouldn't have been in that spot in the first place. He did an all-risk, very low reward play to be in that spot, and a veteran player like Maroon saw him in that spot and buried him in that spot, knowing that he was out of position. That's why that play happens. I still do hold Kulak accountable for that. And I have to be honest, Romanov scores that goal, but I thought it was fully on display. You're talking, Ken, about Tampa Bay, like not looking like a team that, is going to lose 3 straight games. I couldn't agree with you more. And the one thing, it worked tonight, but I took a look at the way that both Kulak and Romanov were playing, and there was a lot of really iffy moments in there. I watched those players play, and I thought about their coach. I can understand why he didn't have them in the series. They don't look quite as solid and settled as everyone else is. Now, I'm interested in seeing what happens with Romanov after you give him another game, right? Like, these two players haven't played for a while. They're stepping into the Stanley Cup final. And, that there's a pace to be keeping up with here, right? So I'd like to see them have another game to find that pace, and maybe they will. But I definitely know, I thought it was on display why Dominic Ducharme wasn't just throwing those players in as the fan base was calling for. You want to touch back on that?
Well, Gustafsson also made 2 glaring errors in the last game, and he's an experienced player. So, I think that you're.
Point.
On the third pairing of any team, you roll. Yeah. I think on the third pairing of almost every team in the NHL, you're rolling the dice to a certain degree. That's just the reality of most situations. Tampa they traded a first-round pick to get David Savard to play on the third pairing. Not a lot of teams have the ability to do that, right? And Mikhail Sergachev is not a third pairing guy. He's on the third pairing. Montreal's third pairing does not measure up to Tampa's third pairing. This isn't a discussion, but
no.
Montreal has to play the guys on the third pairing because their top 4 were getting tired. So I like the fact that they put them both in there. And we've talked about this before. I agree. Kulak was overly aggressive, but we also talked about the need for Romanov and Kulak to be, assertive rather than passive. So sometimes when you're passive, you're just as apt to, likely to make a mistake as if you're being tentative. So, yeah, it was an error that ended up in the back of the net. That's tough if you're the coach. But in that situation, they had no choice. Two defensemen were in the penalty box for 6 minutes.
This is the question that's being asked.
Sure, and that's a great question, and I have a great answer for you. And it was talked about on the broadcast. The reason why they weren't out together was because John Cooper, knowing the situation, put Braden Pointsline out on the ice, so you're not going to put them out against them. Could you have split one and the other? In that situation, they put the best 2 defensemen on the ice that they had available to them. And then I think one of the shifts got a little bit long, and then those 2 guys were out on the ice together. So, was it a coaching mistake? You could call it one, but you're rolling the dice if you split them up too. There's no guarantee that that's the case either. It's a fair point, but
I'll be honest. I thought as soon as those 2, let's give Barclay Goodrow and Coleman's line all the credit in the world. They went out and they got involved in a scrum, and they all paired up with D-men. Like one, I think everyone thinks it's crazy that they took 6 guys out of that scrum, but it's those situations, right, where like if you're a third line guy and you can go to the box, but you can take a really good player with you, you'll do that every time. Well, if you are the Tampa Bay Lightning and you can send out your third line and take 2 of the 4 Clydesdales with you, that creates a challenge for the rest of the Montreal Canadiens team. And as soon as I saw that happen, I was thinking to myself, this is a tough situation for the Canadiens. And sure enough, it ended up costing them. But the point that you're making, I do think, Kenny, I know there's a risk either way, but I was extremely surprised when I saw that they put out the other 2 Clydesdales together for the next shift after that. I would have thought they would have split the 2 of them up knowing what was coming.
Well, Sean, this is what I would say. I mean, I understand that point, and it's certainly a valid one, but I mean, you played your best pairing available against the top line. Like, if you can't play the third pairing against the fourth line of the other team, you can't play them. So would you have preferred to have one on the ice with the other guy? For sure. But if you don't think that Luke Richardson is nervous with Brett Kulak or Romanov out against Braden Point, I mean, come on. I mean, that's a tough matchup for a third pairing guy, even though we know Kulak played on the second pairing regularly last year. Timeout, I mean, sure, but then you lose your ability to challenge. I mean, like, it's easy with 20/20 vision to say all these things, but I mean, if Kulak's not aggressive and that line doesn't score, we're not talking about it, right? You put your third pairing out against the fourth line, it's no big deal. Coaches have to do this all the time. So, I mean, hey, we're here to break down things, and that was something that happened, and it ended up in the back of the net. So then the coach puts himself, under the microscope, and that is absolutely accurate. But I think the bigger mistake by Kulak on that play, yes, it was a mistake to A, pinch, B, get knocked down. I think he should have got in. He still had time to get, like, Pat Maroon still beat you to the net. You should have had time to get your stick on. Like, yes, I know he still came from a chase position, but even there, we talked about, the Blake Coleman goal from laying out. I would have liked to have seen Kulak lay out on that situation. If he dives on that play, I don't think he puts it past Price. He puts it behind the goal line or into the corner. To me, that was the third part of the equation that didn't get talked about really nearly enough. But we shouldn't be, Sean, you and I aren't surprised Pat Maroon scored a big goal. We're surprised that it took this long. Pat Maroon is good for at least one classic goal in a Stanley Cup playoffs. A big moment. There you find Pat Maroon. I mean, people can get on him because of his chirping, and a lot of people don't necessarily like his antics, which I'm okay with. They're not liking his antics. But don't say the guy doesn't produce, because you and I were in the building when he scored one of the biggest games of his career, double overtime in Game 7 in his hometown against Dallas. So it shouldn't surprise anyone that he got away with a subtle bump to get inside position and then went to the net and buried the shot. And once again, Matthew Joseph, absolutely. I mean, every team wants to. We talk about Jake Evans coming into the lineup and doing a great job, and he did. Matthew Joseph has come in and had 2 assists now since being inserted. Barely played in the first game. The last 2 nights, he's been excellent. He's either going to be a very influential player next year playing with Yanni Gourde, or he's going to be playing for somebody else's team in a middle 6 forward role using his speed and size. So, I mean, too, there's the other thing. Maroon got on Josh Anderson. I mean, I got almost as many points as you do. Well, tonight, even though Maroon got a pretty big goal, Josh Anderson had the last laugh. So let's see who gets the last laugh in Game 5.
You brought up that goal by the Big Rig in Game 7 double overtime with the Blues on their way to winning a cup against the Dallas Stars. That was I hosted that game for Hockey Night in Canada and did the bench interview with him after that game, and that was, you want to talk about crazy buildings. That was an interesting experience because we basically both yelled in each other's ear and didn't hear a word that the other guy said. And somehow it turned out to be a really good interview because Elliot Friedman had tweeted out, "Tune in right now to this interview between Sean Reynolds and Pat Maroon because it's something else." I wanted to bring something up here. Kevin is asking how the food has been here. I'm just telling this because Cassie, if you were watching Tim and Friends, and some of you were, I can see by the comments, comments. Cassie brought up this dinner that Kevin Bieksa picked up last night. I was at that dinner last night. It was Elliot, myself, Eric Engels, Ron, Cassie, and Kevin, and Cassie's old hockey coach, her old Olympic hockey coach. So it was a really good night, a lot of fun. We went to a place called Elena. It was another Eric Engels special. So just so everyone knows, like, if Eric Engels ever starts writing a food blog and you are either in Montreal or going to Montreal, check out his food blog, because I think it's 9 places he's sent me to now. And like every single one of them has been an absolute home run. I went back to one today for I'm a big meatball sandwich guy, and I went to this place called Bosa. It's an Italian eatery. Anyways, it was really, really good. I had to go back. It's my 3rd time going back there. And since we are talking about the Tim and Sid show, so Tim and Friends show. I was asked earlier on about there you go.
Did you have one of the toasted hot dogs? Sorry, before you get to that, yes. Finish off the food there.
Yeah, I had
to.
You go. I went and I had one of those. I thought Mike McIntyre, who was there from the Winnipeg Free Press tonight, I think he toasted. It was like, or he said the Seinfeld quote when Terry Hatcher is on the show. She says they're real and they're fabulous.
Spectacular. They're real and they're spectacular.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what he tweeted. But it's fun. This is funny. Somewhat funny, but it's when I'm on air, it's always guys who are kissing me. It's always, and there was a point earlier on in this whole schmozzle of people that are around all the time, and he had a puppet, and in the middle of my hit, he was kissing my cheek with the puppet, and we finished up, and I kind of turned, and he's like, "Hey, you don't mind me kissing you with the puppet, do you?" And I was like, why would you want to kiss me with a puppet? Like, it just didn't make any sense to me. But yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's a schmozzle in
this
there.
This is why T. Will says this is how they say hello.
I guess so. There you go. Cheek to cheek. That's what happened. So someone said hello very personally, but he didn't go cheek to cheek. He did 2 on the same cheek. That's taking it too far, as always. Ken, where do you think the Lightning fell down in that game?
Yeah, I'm not really sure they fell down anywhere, to be perfectly honest, Sean. They erased 2 leads. I mean, that's what championship teams do. I mean, they were not able to get the finisher, obviously, so they're going to have to go back to the drawing board. But, I mean, to me, this is like what you and I talked about after game 2. I mean, the Lightning know the recipe. I mean, they just have to get to the recipe. Today, Montreal didn't let them get to the recipe. Today was the first time that Montreal had all the ingredients, John. For much of the final, they've been searching for the ingredients. They knew what was required to make the feast, but they haven't been able to get that, first goal. And today they got it. I mean, it's not as simple as the first goal, but Montreal plays differently when they have the lead. We've seen it all throughout the playoffs. They're much more comfortable. They can lock it down as well as any team in the National Hockey League. They got a lot of confidence from it. But I mean, if you're Tampa, I mean, you're not going back and writing up a new game plan. I mean, you've had success for the majority of this final. I mean, yes, in game 2, you could argue that Montreal was clearly the better team for the bulk of the first 2 periods, but Tampa, as they have been opportunistic at times. So. And there's the other part by Ray-Ban. I mean, John Cooper was asked about this, Sean, in the postgame. I mean, what else can you do? Well, hit the inside of the post. The Lightning had some incredible, and these aren't just, Price played it perfectly, and that's all that he had looks. Like, these are prime time, prime real estate scoring chances that somehow went off the post. The Braden Point one is exceptional. I mean, the fact that Nikita Kucherov got loose on that back end for that late tip that went off the post, that tells you all you need to know about the situation. I mean, if you get open in that spot, I mean, if you're Montreal, that wasn't that you decided the path of least resistance or the best option was to leave Kucherov open on the back door. No, that's not where you want to leave him open for a clear pass. So, and I love Ryan McDonough's series. He's been exceptional, and that's just another great play right there by Ryan McDonough. But hey, Canadians needed a couple breaks. They got the couple breaks tonight, and they took advantage of them. The mayor of Tampa might be happy, but John Cooper is not happy. So, hey, we knew Montreal would respond. Now we're gonna have to see how Tampa responds. They've been responding themselves. Hey, we know that the Canadians beat 3 very good teams to get to the Stanley Cup final. Let's not forget the path that the Tampa Bay Lightning have taken here in these playoffs either. I mean, they played in one of the toughest divisions in hockey. They knocked off the Florida Panthers, they knocked off the Carolina Hurricanes, and they knocked off the New York Islanders. So,
tough road.
This is not just an easy cakewalk to the final, nor did we expect it to be a sweep. So, I think great job by Montreal, but I don't think for some folks, and I'm not trying to rain on your parade, but if you're looking for a team being stressed out or nervous about being up 3-1, the Tampa Bay Lightning are not your team that is looking to crumble. They may not win in 5, but they're not going to be nervous. That I'm pretty confident of.
We love bringing in guests who can add some analysis to the show. And our next guest, Luke Fox, was sitting right up beside me up in the press box. So good to see him. It's been a while. He's on his first road trip in a while. Luke, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Not as good as the people in Montreal, though. I think they're pretty happy that they got that win. I think it might have been a little bit embarrassing, if somehow Tampa were to sweep. So I think it was a great game for them to save face. And it was kind of, a trademark Montreal win in that Carey Price needed to stand on his head, and he did. They needed to kill a ton of penalties, and they killed all 5 of them. And I thought that was a massive momentum swing at the end. Like I was getting ready to write about Tampa Bay hoisting the cup under these 25 Montreal banners, getting 3 minutes on a clean sheet of ice in overtime with that lethal power play. I thought it was over. And then as soon as they killed it, though, the momentum just flipped. And there's Josh Anderson busting down the wing. So it was a pretty fun ending. And I think it was the most entertaining of the 4 games so far.
Yeah. Hey, while you touched on it, the Canadiens penalty kill, which had been, victimized earlier on in this series, looked really, really good. What do you think, Luke, they did to figure it out tonight? And do you think that it's something that they can carry forward in this series?
Wow. It's going to be tough to carry it forward. The 5 guys that Tampa brings out for that power play, it's just scary. And they just zip it around. But I think that, they stopped them from even getting entries a couple times. I thought that was huge. But, it's cliche, but I really think their best penalty killer was Carey Price. Like, he made some 10-bell saves. Tampa hit a couple posts. I saw John Cooper comment on that. Like, what could we have done better? And he said, maybe not hit so many posts. If you look at the high danger chances, it was like 3-1 in favor of Tampa through the game. Like, but that's Montreal's strength is penalty killing. And I think it seemed to me there was an elevated element of determination. It was a rougher game, a more physical game, a bit of a nastier game, and that's been Montreal's trademark throughout these playoffs. And I think they got away from that a little bit in this series. I think maybe they felt a little bit overwhelmed from the moment, where Tampa has kind of conducted itself as this team that has been there, done that, because literally they have only 10 months ago. So Montreal played more their style of game and kind of was fighting like they needed to fight. It was, it was winner, that's it.
I appreciate the passion of the Canadiens fans here who think that I'm a Canadiens fan. I'm happy for a great
Tampa
series.
Fan. They're calling you a Tampa fan.
I don't know why. That's great of you.
Maybe you should check your analysis, Ken.
Maybe you should listen to the games that we've talked about Montreal for the last 3 rounds. I love the way that the Canadiens have played to get here, but I just think that if you think that Tampa's going to suddenly fold or be nervous because of one game, I just don't think that that's the case. I love the way the Canadiens played tonight. I love the way that they played in game 2. They've had a great run, and I love the way that Carey Price answered. I love this answer from Dom Ducharme to Arpon Basu's question. No, I did not say anything to Carey Price after the last game. I tapped him on the pads. He said what he said, and he answered the bell tonight, which is what we all expected him to do. And for someone who suggested in the chat, that this is an act for Carey Price. I mean, I would suggest you check the receipts from when he was a junior hockey player. This is who Carey Price is. There's no act. This is how he's been his entire career. It's how he was been when he was in the Western Hockey League with the Hamilton Bulldogs, with the Montreal Canadiens, with Team Canada, with wherever you find him. This is Carey Price. This is who he is. He's not a bombastic personality. He lets his play do the talking, and he doesn't get rattled. Which is part of what's made him great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would say what isn't Carey Price is what we saw in Game 3. Letting in two softies. Definitely the Hedman goal was a softie. He should have had it. Two long range shots to start the game, and it just kind of took the crowd right out of it. And yeah, this was more typical Carey Price tonight. And it's good to see. You want to see teams' best players shine on this stage. The guy's never been to a Stanley Cup final. I mean, we all know what he's done in the Olympics, but you want to see superstars like that play their best hockey under these bright lights. So good on him for having a night tonight.
I'll say it again, as I said earlier in the show, they let him see the puck, right? And I think that there's just been too many instances in the first 3 games of that series where he couldn't see the puck, and they were allowing Tampa to take away his eyes. And, I think that got to him, some of those, especially that last game, that first goal that goes in, it's just like you'd said, a softie from the point, but he never sees it, right? And then I think that maybe rattled him a little bit. I don't know that he's that easy to rattle, but I mean, he definitely hadn't been himself. His numbers would suggest that so far in that series. But I thought tonight, when he's a goalie, that you allow him to see the puck, he does a lot of great things. I want to go back, a lot of people saying, their PK, it's your best penalty killer, and I agree with you. Luke Fox is typically your goaltender, but there were a lot of signs for me that the Canadiens' power play or penalty kill was right on tonight. And one of that is the way that they were able to kind of deny zone entries for a while. 2, their puck retrieval and their ability to get it down seemed a lot more confident and direct compared to what it had been in other nights. But if you guys notice, especially on that top unit, the way they set up their penalty kill defense was they were giving Hedman a lot of time with the puck, almost daring him to shoot, but they would not allow the pass to Stamkos for the one-timer. The guy on that side of the box was parked in that lane, and they would not allow it to go that way. So that's why you'd start to see Kucherov take a couple of those one-timers, which they were trying to set up over and over again. And I think at the beginning of the game, when things first started out, Kucherov was faking a lot of those one-timers because he doesn't want to take them. He'd rather get something, into point or back to Hedman quickly and across to Stamkos, or right across the gut to Stamkos, he likes to do as well. But the Canadiens, in that whole pick your poison model, were making sure that puck didn't go to Stamkos. But the thing that told me that they were right on was Stamkos at one point went further down. He dropped further down to make it a really, really low angle shot. And the Canadiens then allowed the puck to go to him because they recognized that, even though it's Steve Stamkos, that suddenly became the less dangerous of the play. And if you try to jump out of that lane and try and cut off that pass, it would have opened up Braden Point in the middle, so that if you could get the puck through to Steven Stamkos, they could get it up to Braden Point for a shot in the slot. So to me, there was a really, really strong awareness. And I think you got to give Dominic Ducharme credit again, because yesterday we were talking, and I don't know, Luke, I don't know if you and I had this conversation. Ken, I think you and I did on our sound on that we did. But the Tampa Bay Lightning had a practice yesterday, and it looked astounding. They were flying up and down the ice. It was just, you could just on display how fast this team is and how good their puck movement is and how much they engage and try and force the puck in the neutral zone. The Canadiens had a practice where they took half their players, lined them up in a crescent moon, and did shots for the entire game, like something out of a peewee practice. And on the other side of the ice, the penalty kill and the power play went at each other for the entirety of the practice. And to me, it looked like if I was choosing who won this game based on the practice, I was taking the Tampa Bay Lightning 100 times out of 99. It was just looked so crazy. But whatever the Montreal Canadiens did, they got their penalty kill going there, and boy, oh boy, was it ever important tonight. I thought, outside of the changes that Dominic Ducharme made, I thought the penalty kill was the biggest, source of their victory tonight. As someone said, potentially, I think if the Canadiens can make a series of this, that 4-minute penalty that they killed may be exactly what someone had said earlier on in the chat room. We may look at that as the turning point. Luke, I wanted to get your thoughts on the changes that Dominic Ducharme made and how you think they may have paid off, if you do think they paid off.
Well, absolutely, they paid off. I mean, that's exactly what happens, right? You win the game, and then everyone says, "Oh, brilliant coach." And if you make the changes and you lose the game, often the coach gets blamed. But I thought Jake Evans had a fabulous game.
Agreed.
A lot of people talk about probably Romanov just because he scored the goal and it was his first action in 21 games, and he's a bit of a fan favorite. He's young, fast skater, he's got some offensive flair. Before he scored the goal, and I think we were even talking about this during the game, Sean, there was a couple, bad zone exits by his part, and in his own zone, he kind of looked a little bit overwhelmed by the moment, but he gets the goal. So, this is a team that has struggled to score goals, so he gets a ton of credit for that. But Jake Evans had an absolutely fabulous game. It seemed like Dominic Ducharme was trying to build kind of a new look third line, shutdown line, by popping Evans in there and basically changing the whole mix of his top nine. And then by adding Anderson to the Caulfield Suzuki combo, that was their best line all night. And, they get the first goal, which they hadn't got all series, which was huge. And then, of course, that same line is on the ice and generates the winning goal. I thought he made some great changes. Pretty bold change to swap out your complete second pair on D, though. Usually you just see a coach make one, maybe change it one defenseman, but changing a whole D pair is kind of an interesting move. And he just says, hey, we have the depth, like we might as well use it.
Luke, we typically cover the Jets. You typically cover the Leafs. I'm very interested in this because you cover two of the greatest players in the game, but two players that take a little bit of heat for, maybe what, we know what they are, and there's criticisms, especially Mitch Marner after the playoffs of what he hasn't been. I wonder with, this Montreal Canadiens team brewing and a little bit of the youth coming up, clearly they don't have anyone on this team, and I would throw Cole Caulfield in there, who are likely capable of generating the amount of points that Marner's and Matthews do. But I wonder what you see in Suzuki, and as a guy who's going to be covering this team coming up and clashing against the Leafs time and time again, what you think the Montreal Canadiens have in this player, because his ability to show up at his age in games like this absolutely marvels me.
Oh, it is really impressive. And I think what's impressive to me is he just keeps getting better. As the competition gets harder, as the stakes get higher, he seems to raise his game and be a difference maker. And he was probably their best forward tonight. I mean, I know Josh Anderson gets the 2 goals and is the hero, but I think Suzuki was their best all-around forward tonight. I thought he was absolutely fabulous. And it really is something, especially when you look back on the trade, and giving away Pacioretty, who was more expensive, older, the fact that they defeat the Golden Knights to make it this far, the fact that Suzuki generates more offense than Pacioretty in that series, and then here he is in the Stanley Cup final. I mean, what a nice bit of work by Marc Bergevin, and I certainly haven't agreed with all his trades. You can look across the ice and see a guy by the name of Mikhail Sergachev, and he's having turned into a really nice two-way defenseman.
Oh man.
But the Suzuki trade is, a slam dunk. This guy's phenomenal, and just, if you're a Montreal fan, you've got to be excited. Just the fact that he's so young still, and he's getting this experience. Like this is incredible experience. This run for this kid.
I just thought that his ability to stay as calm as he does, and he doesn't really show any downside defensively. Like he's one of these guys. We talk so much about Matt Barzal, Luke, and we've done so in this space about how he walked into the league as a point per game player, right? And then his head coach said to him, okay, now if you want to be a points guy, you can do that, or we can tear you down and make you a complete player and like a Steve Yzerman guy, but we're going to fast forward the plan. Steve Yzerman did it about 10 years into his career. We're going to do it at the front end of your career, and you're going to be a winner for the entire thing, right? It takes a lot to convince a player to do that, and I think it's a long road to go down that. For a player to come baked in like the way that Nick Suzuki is in that regard, like I don't think he's ever going to be a point per game player, although I mean there's potential for it, but like he's got, to me, you know, this Jonathan Toews type quality. Now I don't say they play the same kind of game, I'm not saying that one bit, but this idea of Jonathan Toews, you can see if he decides that he wants to be a goal scorer or a point producer, he can go out and do it. He's shown that he's done that before, but he kind of seemed to come into the league early with that baked-in idea, that realization of there was better ways for him to affect the game. I am just absolutely blown away by Nick Suzuki and his ability to score goals when they count most, as consistently as he has, and have as many consistent games as he has without too much of a downside. And I say that realizing I said earlier on in the show that I didn't think he back checked hard enough on that game time, or sorry, on the first goal of the game. And I don't think that he did. But no one's perfect. But the other thing that we've seen, Ken, what game was it? Game 3 of the series against the Vegas Golden Knights. We thought he'd had a really off night and called him out on that and said he needed to be better the next game. This is one of those guys that I'm convinced at this stage, if you're ever, doing analysis like we are and saying, this guy needs to be better next game, book it. That guy is going to be better next game. Like, go put a bet down that he's going to have a point in the next game, or he's going to affect the game in some way, because he does that time and time again. His bounce back is phenomenal. His will to compete is, probably one of the best on any team that he's played against so far these playoffs. He is really turning into something.
And what I would add is, what is it like for a guy like that to learn from Philip Deneau? Like, to have such a responsible two-way centerman on your team to even if they're not talking all the time, which I'm sure that they are to a certain extent, but just to watch that example, to have that in front of you. And the second thing I would say is the coach he has, Dominic Ducharme. You have to play two ways or you don't even play. Ask Thomas Tatar. Ask Jesperi Kotkaniemi. So, I mean, I think there's an accountability in terms of defense that's built in by the coaching staff and by the leaders on this team.
Ken, anywhere you want to go before we shut this down?
Just a quick one. I mean, a lot of folks asking about Caulfield, and Caulfield is, big impact again tonight. He's been fun to watch. The reason we're talking about Suzuki a little bit more is because he's a little bit more of a well-rounded player. Some folks, there's obviously the comparison to Patrice Bergeron. He needs to rack up the trophy case before we go to the Bergeron comparison. But could he grow into that kind of player? Perhaps. I mean, I think the thing about Suzuki is that he's a little bit more offensive at this stage of his career. I love the way that he's playing. In terms of Caulfield, I think that he might be a little bit more dynamic, but Suzuki is just a little bit more of an all-around player. At least he's a little bit further ahead in terms of Caulfield. But I mean, these two guys are going to be the cornerstones of this franchise moving forward. We know that Carey Price will remain there, and we know their defense core will be important. But in order for the Canadiens to continue on this trajectory, and Luke, I want to ask you too, like Sean and I have both been debating this. I mean, you follow the Atlantic very closely. I mean, what's it going to take for Montreal to not just stay in the conversation, but to remain a playoff team in what is a very deep division, might be becoming the deepest division in hockey as early as the fall? Yeah,
there's a certain risk there that they won't even make the playoffs, because, I mean, Bergevin purposely built this team for playoff hockey. In regular season, they didn't have as many wins as the Calgary Flames. Like, they barely made it in, right? They were 18th place team, and they struggle to score goals. I mean, they play an excellent system and a hard brand of hockey that's given them a lot of success in these playoffs, and they showed well in the bubble. But in the regular season, you get a couple bad injuries, or Carey Price isn't on his game. That Atlantic is going to be a beast. Tampa, I know they're going to take a hit, and because the salary cap should finally catch up to them, and Seattle will take a good player, but they're still going to be relevant. Boston, I bet, is going to spend this offseason, and they should still be relevant. Toronto thinks it can win the cup every year. Yeah. It's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge.
And quick one for me, for all the folks who think I am not a Habs fan, I actually think that the Canadiens are a playoff team next season. So I'll leave you with that, folks.
I just see so much of, and I don't know, Luke, if you'd agree with this, I just see so much of the Dallas Stars in them. Like the Dallas Stars go to the Cup final last year. And Ken's right about this. The first thing he'll counter with is that COVID hit them and it had something to do with them. But I think that...
Plus Sagan. I mean, they were out there without their best player for the majority of the year this year.
Their best player? You still think he's their best player?
Sorry, Heiskanen is probably their best player, but he's on a team that doesn't score. He's their most offensive player up front.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that. I'll say this. If you remember last year, the year that they went to the Cup final, they started the year losing, 7 of their first 8 games, and then they fought their way back into relevance, and then were sinking like a stone before the COVID shutdown. And that's why they reminded me of the Canadiens, because they're this big, hard team to play against that's built for the playoffs. But there's these stretches of the regular season that they can go to sleep. And Luke, you'll be more than familiar with the Canadiens' woes when it comes to that, where they can have themselves right in the thick of things, and then they drop for 8 straight games and then pick it up again and drop for 8 straight games. I don't know. Maybe there's something to do with how being, these big kind of grinding teams that maybe they lose interest. I think you're right about Carey Price. Playoff Carey Price is an entirely different animal than regular season Carey Price is. And to your point too, I think that, it's why I've said this before. I think that if there was any way they could swing it, and again, it's not a dumb comment, but for me to say it is okay, let's just go wave your magic wand and make it happen. But if the Canadiens could get a player like Patrick Laine and put him on a line with someone like Suzuki, I think Laine is now back to being a 40, 50 goal scorer. And when you get a guy who can score that many goals, those kind of guys win you games in the regular season just because they rack up numbers. And as they rack up numbers, it's like buying runs in baseball, right? You're going to win some games out of that. So, if you've got a solid team and you can add scorers like that, I think it's one of the elements that the Canadiens are missing. So, like Ken says, I think they're around there, but I do also think you are entirely right, Luke. In the Montreal Canadiens, one of those really good teams that we've talked about: Boston, Tampa, Toronto, Montreal, Tampa Bay, and Florida. Yeah. One of them's for sure going to miss the playoffs, if not 2 of those teams. So it's a tough division. It's a man-eater division. It's going to be tough. So the Canadiens got to make the best of the time they have right now. Luke, it's awesome to see you. Thank you for coming on the show. You're sticking around, aren't you?
I am. Yeah, I'm okay. Here. I'm here until they award the cup. So
are you here by yourself?
I'm here by myself. Yeah.
All right. We're gonna go to a burger place. Eric Engels told me about tomorrow, so I'll take you there. People on the show are interested in the food that we're eating, so I'll bring you along.
You're in for some good. You're in for some good stuff.
I need a change from the smoked meat, so I'm in.
Okay, but we're walking over 5 kilometers to go there. Are you okay with that?
Do you got a Bixi app?
What's a Bixi app?
It's the bikes. What that is. The bikes.
Oh yeah, okay. I'll do the bike.
Hey,
I'll do the bike.
You're not getting your steps that way, buddy. You're cheating here. You're cheating.
I'll walk someplace for dessert. I'll figure it out. Anyways, Luke, awesome to have you on. We'll get together tomorrow, the day after, and the day after that. I love my Luke Fox time. It's going to be great. Ken, awesome analysis as usual. And our chat room, you were rocking it as usual tonight. Great stuff. Absolutely loved it. Thanks for joining us. We will be back after Game 5. And who knows, if the headband has the magical powers that Kenny's water bottle thinks it has, maybe we'll be around for a Game 6 as well. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a great night.
All right. Thanks, guys.